they could also be descriptors for his career. For most of his 91 years, Mr. Lee, or just Stan, as generations of kids have come to know him, has been the hero of business, creating characters like Spider-Man, Iron Man, the Hulk, the Avengers, but he's still in the hero game. In January, we're going to meet Stephen Lee and a lot of other teenagers who have been gifted powers connected to the Chinese zodiac in his book called Zodiac. We're going to get introduced to him, but right now we're going to get introduced to Stan Lee, although I think you probably know him. So, ladies and gentlemen, Stan Lee.
Wherever you want.
Where are you going to be? I can be here, I can be here. No, I better stay close to you. I don't trust them. Okay. Let the good times roll.
So Stan, I know you're now based on the West Coast, but you are a New York native.
Hold it 1 minute. I gotta tell you, I don't hear as well as I used to, and unfortunately, when he speaks in that thing, it comes out very muffled. Okay. Talk to them in the microphone, but when you talk to me, talk like a person.
What? You are a New York native. What do you mean? You're a New York native.
We just made it?
Yeah.
One or the other.
What do you miss about New York City?
Well, I'm back in my city. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stand next to Rob.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, good idea. See, this is why I keep you around. Here we go. Have a microphone. Thank you. I have a card here with my name on it. Okay.
What do you miss most about New York City when you're not here?
Oh, I miss everything. New York used to be my hometown. Mostly I miss walking. We used to walk everywhere when we lived here. Now I live in Los Angeles, and no matter where you go, you have to take a car, or an ox cart, or something. So, although here it can be pretty far away too. You take a subway, you take a bus, you take... I miss the spirit, the excitement, the action in New York City. I miss being interviewed by you.
Thank you, Sam. I know probably a lot of people want to know about this new Zodiac book of yours. What can you tell us about what's most exciting about it for you?
Well, this new Zodiac book is different than anything I've ever done because the hero doesn't have one superpower that he or she got from someone and exploits it. But this involves the 12 legendary characters of the Chinese Zodiac. And all of those powers rotate back and forth with our hero. And it becomes a different type of story than any I've ever worked on. I don't work on it myself. I have a collaborator, Stuart Moore, who's a great writer. And there are more illustrations in this novel than any novel that's ever been published. It's not what we call a graphic novel. It's not a comic book. It's a real novel. But there are more than 50 pages of magnificent illustrations by Andy Tong, who's a wonderful writer, artist rather. I'm the wonderful writer. I almost lost myself there. And it's different, as I say, than any superhero book I've done. It delves into Chinese mythology with the Chinese zodiac characters. You know, I'm looking at them and you asked the question, excuse me, it's all the zodiac characters. Anyway, that's about as much as I can tell you because this is a very hush-hush secret book. It's so secret that I've been traveling around the country promoting it. And it's done, of course, one of the most exciting things to me is it's being published by the Disney Company. And you can't do better than that. And my own company, POW Entertainment, to think that we're part of the Disney Company, it's very exciting. And to be here talking to all of you is even more exciting. And so far, nobody has walked out, which is a record for me. Okay, it's up to you now.
All right. So you have a history with kids being thrust into extraordinary circumstances, going back to Peter Parker. What was the most extraordinary circumstance ever that teenage Stan Lee had to deal with?
Well, one of my most extraordinary circumstances is sitting right here. With all you literary people, I usually talk to just ordinary people. But I don't know, extraordinary circumstance. My life has had, every day is an extraordinary circumstance. Because I think lately, I've been going to a lot of comic book conventions. And don't ask me why, but so many people, dozens over the past couple of years, have asked me to write my name on their arm or their shoulder or their leg, and they want to get it tattooed. And if there's anything more extraordinary than that, I don't know what it could be.
What was teenage Stan Lee like? Was he a reader?
Oh, I was adorable. My mother told me. I wasn't a leader. I always had one problem. I was always the youngest person at whatever I did, so I was never a leader. And the street where I grew up, I was the youngest kid amongst all the kids. So I was the one, they borrowed my football or my baseball, and if I was lucky, they'd let me play with them with it. Then I went to school. I was always the youngest kid in my class. I went to the Army. I was the youngest guy in my platoon. I finally got a job at Marvel, which was then called Magazine Management Company. I'm talking about the 1950s. And I was the youngest person working in the office. When I became an editor, I was the youngest editor. And now, to show you how strange life is, I'll bet you I'm the oldest guy in this room. I don't know if you're applauding because I'm the oldest guy or because you won the bet.
What was your first week like at Marvel Comics?
Well, my first week at Marvel Comics, which then was called, God knows, it wasn't Marvel Comics, Goodman Publications or Magazine Management or something like that. And I was hired by two guys named Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. And I might add, they're two geniuses, or they were, and they were running the comic, they were the comic department, because the publisher, Martin Goodman, he also had other magazines. He had sports magazines and adventure magazines, some rather sexy magazines, all different kinds. And the comics were almost like a throwaway then. So Joe and Jack, they handled them. They needed somebody to fill the inkwells. In those days they used ink. And to run down to the drugstore and get them sandwiches at lunch hour. And to erase the pages. See, first they would draw the page in pencil. Then they would go over it in ink. And the person who went over it in ink was known as the inker. So once the page had been gone over in ink, there were always little remaining pencil lines left. And it was my job to erase those pencil lines. And boy, I better not miss one. So I did all that inspiring work for a few months. And then, for some reason or other, Joe and Jack were fired. And the publisher, Goodman, looked around. I was the only guy in the office. So he said, Stan, do you think that, he probably didn't even call me Stan, he probably said, hey kid, do you think that you can take care of things until I can hire a grown-up? Well, when you're 17 or so, what do you know? I said, sure, I can handle it. And I think he forgot that the comics were so unimportant to him, he forgot all about it. I stayed there ever since. And I started writing stuff, and then I started hiring other artists. And before you knew it, I was the editor. Before he knew it, I think. So that was my early days. What was the question? It's terrible. You start talking, you forget why you started, and I'm so in love with the sound of my own voice, which you'd never suspect.
Other than you were responsible for so many superheroes that we all love in the mostly mainly in the '60s. In today's world, who is most relevant?
Most relevant?
Yeah.
Me.
Other than you.
I would like to think that they're all relevant in their own way, because you got to be relevant in order to sell a lot of copies and in order to make a lot of good movies. Anything, I think, that makes a good story is relevant, because people love good stories. And anything that can bring somebody a little bit of enjoyment, because there are so many things that can make people miserable in this world. There's so many tragic events. This is probably getting away from your question, but I used to be embarrassed because I was a writer, because I felt there are people building bridges and doing important things, and I'm writing these idiotic stories. And then, little by little, as the fan mail came in, and as I was invited to conventions and so forth, I realized entertainment is very important to people. And I began to realize that's why people who are singers, like Frank Sinatra was, people who are actors, dancers, writers, musicians, anybody who entertains the public is really doing a good service. So instead of being embarrassed by what I did, I now like what I do, and I think everything you people do, everything that has to do with books, everything that has to do with entertaining the public and making them forget their troubles for a little while and bringing them pleasure. Now you're wondering how I got off the subject, but here's where I put it all together. Anything like that is relevant. Boy, they did that well.
Your cameos in Marvel movies are a thing of legend. I heard you snagged one for Guardians of the Galaxy. Can you give any of these fans a scoop on that? Yeah, I bet you're going to do one for Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh yes.
Can you give me
I'm not allowed to tell you what my Guardians of the Galaxy cameo is, but I can tell you I did it, and I have no idea what it has to do with the movie. I can't wait to see it myself, to see how it fits into whatever the hell the story is. But I'm going to tell you, because you're such a good audience, I'm going to level with you, and I'm going to tell you why these cameos are important. And I'm going to tell you why they're so brief. And I'm going to tell you why, as a matter of fact, I didn't do one in the X-Men. It was arranged that way. And here's why, and you'll understand, because you're a bright audience. You gotta flatter them, it keeps their attention. I want you to picture this. You're in the audience, you're watching the X-Men, the movie ends. You say, wait a minute, I didn't see Stan's cameo. I must have blinked, or I reached down for popcorn or something. So what do? You run back to the box office. You buy another ticket, you wait to see it again. If you're a real fan, you might buy a third ticket. That's why the movie made so much money. They said, Stan, don't be in this one, they'll buy lots of tickets. See, they're thinking every minute.
Who have you been most starstruck by?
Have I been most struck by?
Yeah, starstruck.
Starting with you.
Okay. One of the names.
I don't know, I'm struck by anybody who's accomplished anything impresses the hell out of me. But to start at the top, I don't want to sound like a name dropper, but I was having dinner with Ronald Reagan. I gotta tell you this, it was a charity function and somehow or other, I'm sitting here, ex-President Reagan is sitting right there, facing me. This was after he was president. Now, what do you say to the ex-president of the United States while he's buttering his bagel? So I was stuck for conversation, but I had to say something. So it occurred to me, I said, boy, you must be so glad that the cares of the world are off your shoulders now. And he said, I will never forget this. He looked at me with his eyes wide open, full of enthusiasm, and he said, no, I love being president. Never forget that. Now, I'm not really trying to impress you with my knowledge of presidents, but as I said to George Bush, he gave me some sort of a medal. It's called the Medal of the Arts. It's not just me, he had a few people. And one of them was this girl who always played opposite Errol Flynn. What was her name?
Olivia de Havilland.
Olivia de Havilland. Thank you very much. I'll reward you later. Olivia de Havilland was just ahead of me, and he put this medal around her neck on the ribbon, and he kissed her on the cheek. Now it was my turn. And I couldn't, I always say stupid things, as you know by now. I couldn't stop myself. I said, I'm not going to have to kiss you. What am I doing? And I got to tell you, he burst into laughter. The two of us started laughing, and some photographers took the pictures. I got the picture hanging on the wall, and because I'm a show-off, hanging on the wall in my office. So the two of us laughing like we're good friends and we're sharing a joke together. Then when Bill Clinton I'll make you sorry you asked. They threw some sort of a big party, an outdoor party in Los Angeles for some reason, a fundraiser probably for Bill Clinton. And they asked me to be the guy to introduce him on stage. Well, I figured, who better than me? So we did. I introduced him and he talked to me for a while. And the thing that impressed me, and my wife, because she noticed it more, it was outdoors in the hills. And everybody in the audience was there, and Bill Clinton was here, and I was there talking about him. But behind us, and all over on the side, were men with rifles. They were soldiers and Secret Service men, and they were guarding this thing. Everywhere you looked, semi-hidden in the bushes, somebody with a rifle. So that really impressed the hell out of me. I didn't know if they were protecting us or if they were assassins. Luckily, they weren't assassins. There were a lot of other presidents, but why go through them?
Have you met Obama?
Oh, I'll tell you about Obama. We did a comic book with him on the cover, Spider-Man and Obama, and he didn't invite me to the White House. But I have used him in a story I've told often. When people say to me, what was it like doing comics years ago? And I say, comics had absolutely no respect. I'm going back to the 50s. Parents wouldn't let their kids read comics. Everybody hated them. And I would go to a party, and somebody would say to me, what do you do? Well, I knew what was coming if I said. So I say, I'm a writer, and I start walking away. But they follow me. What do you write? And I kept walking. I say, hey, children's stories, and I keep walking. What kind of children's stories? At some point, I had to say comic books, and then the guy would turn around as if I had the plague and walk away. Today, it's different. Here's where Obama comes in. Today, I'm at a party, and I hear somebody say, excuse me a minute, President Obama, I think I just saw Stan Lee walking. If you believe that, I have a big
Stan Lee's nightstand these days?
Oh, I'm sorry you asked that. Now this is a tragic story. I'm not able to read books anymore. My eyesight and my hearing have both. I know I sit here looking like the most perfect physical specimen you have ever seen, and I probably am, but I cannot see well enough to read a book, and I cannot hear well enough to do this too often. So I don't. In the office, when they give me a memo, they do it on the computer, and they use size 20 font or something so that I can read it. And it's really my biggest regret. I cannot read a book, I cannot read a newspaper, and all I can do is watch television and hope that the picture is clear enough. But I'm not looking for pity, because I've really read a lot of books. It's not as though I've never read books. I know what a book is. I like books. I'm all in favor of books.
What are some of your all-time favorite books?
My favorite books?
Your favorite book?
Oh golly, every book I've read is one of my. I've loved every book. I love the stories of Jules Verne. I loved Edgar Allan Poe. I loved Charles Dickens. I loved Shakespeare. When I was young, I probably didn't understand, but I loved the what-ho Horatio type of dialogue, you know? And I loved the Hardy Boys. I loved everything I read. To me, reading is the greatest thing there is in the world. And books, man. When I was a kid, my father was unemployed most of the time, so we were always worried about money. We lived in this little apartment facing the rear in the Bronx, and really reading books was about, and going to a movie once every month when I saved up the money, it was the only thing that provided any entertainment or enjoyment or even knowledge. So I know you're the wrong audience to say this to, but I really love books.
You've lived a very, very fruitful life, and it doesn't seem like you're stopping anytime soon. But looking back, what are the two best days, professionally and personally, that you've ever had?
You know, that's the toughest question in the world. This is one of the best days I've had. You people are a great audience. I hope you have a lot of time, because I don't tend to leave. Maybe one of the days was when the first Marvel movie, the big movie, came out, X-Men, and it did so well, and then Spider-Man did so well, and we realized we're onto something. I didn't know we'd take over the whole entertainment industry. The other good day that I just remember now, I haven't thought of this for years. I worked for this publisher who was not the brightest guy in the world. When I gave him the idea for Spider-Man, he hated it. He said, "Stan, you can't call a character Spider-Man. People hate spiders." And it went on and on. The man was not the greatest. But anyway, he had a son who was working there also, because he owned the company, so he could have a son working there. And at one point, the company was bought by a small conglomerate. And he told this small conglomerate he wanted his son to become the publisher. Well, after the company was bought, they fired the son, and they made me the publisher. And you asked what was one of the best moments for me. Oh, I can be vengeful.
You mentioned the Marvel movies, and now we're going to have an Ant-Man movie of all.
Why do you sound surprised?
I'm more happy than surprised. But do you take a lot of pride in that? That there's so many of these characters that we all love, and now there's little kids that are being introduced to them on the screen.
Well, now the kids are being introduced to them on Zodiac.
Well, that's true too.
See, I always have to find a way to get back to that. And Zodiac is unlike any other book. Did I tell you it's published by Disney, and POW is involved? POW, that's P-O-W, that's my company. And of course you all know it stands for Purveyors of Wonder. Now there's a name. Now let me tell you about names. We were called Atlas Comics. And after we did Fantastic Four and Spider-Man, and we knew we were onto something, I said, let's change the name of the company and get something meaningful. And I decided to call it Marvel, because I love advertising. And we could have ads that say, make mine Marvel, welcome to the Marvel age of comics, and Marvel marches on, stuff like that. You can see how corny I am. However, at the same time as we changed, or a little after we changed our name, a company called National Comics, which published Superman and Batman, they said, well, if they change their name, we'll change our name. And they saw that we had this great name, Marvel. So they paid, I didn't know there were people like this, they paid a specialist to come up with a great name for them. So we were Marvel. And what did the specialist come up with? DC. What do you do with DC? So maybe it's not that we're so good, it's that nobody else knows what they're doing. If there are any DC people there, I'm only kidding.
We do have some time for audience questions if you
Don't ask anything that requires knowledge or information. Keep it general.
Yeah, if you want to start a lineup here, then we can start. That's enough.
There are more people up here than sitting in the seats.
When in a recent storyline, writer Dan Slott, the current Spider-Man writer, he killed off Peter Parker for a little bit. He came back though. He's still alive. But I mean, did he talk to you and ask for your blessing before he got started?
I might as well explain that. I have really nothing to do with the stories at Marvel anymore. I was not the guy who said kill Peter Parker, put him in Doc Ock's body or whatever. Those are clever ideas, but I cannot take the credit for it. I'm so busy going to meetings like this, making a fool of myself, that I don't do anything at Marvel anymore. And the only creative stuff I do really is for POW Entertainment and whatever I do for Disney. I'm trying to keep Disney afloat. I'm doing it just like that.
What were your biggest inspirations when you created characters like Spider-Man and Iron Man? And kind of what really inspired those for you?
You know, that's the toughest question in the world. Well, I'll take with Spider-Man, for example. I had already done the X-Men and maybe the Hulk, I can't remember the order, but my idiot publisher said to me, hey Stan, come up with another superhero, we're on a roll. So when you come up with a superhero, the first thing you have to do is figure out what is his power. So I had to come up with a new power, and I saw a fly crawling on the wall. And I said, gosh, if I could get a superhero who could stick to walls like an insect. So then I tried to think of a name. Insect Man, nah, didn't do it. Mosquito Man, I got down to Spider-Man, and somehow it sounded dramatic. Spider-Man. And I thought, gee, I could even have him shoot webs. So I ran to my publisher, and I think I mentioned this to you before. He said to me, oh, and I also wanted him to be a teenager, because I wanted to make him different than the other heroes. And again, to make him different, I wanted him to have personal problems. So I ran to my boss, and I told him what I wanted. And he said, Spider-Man is the worst name in the world. You can't call him that. People hate spiders. And you want him to be a teenager? Stan, don't you realize teenagers can only be sidekicks? And then he said, and you want him to have personal problems? Stan, don't you know what a superhero is? They don't have personal problems. So I was not met with the most enthusiastic reception. However, we were about to kill a magazine. Now, when you're killing a magazine, nobody cares what you couldn't put in the last issue. So to get it out of my system, I put Spider-Man in the last issue of that magazine. It was called Amazing Fantasy. And I put him on the cover. A month later, the sales figures came in, and it was our best-selling book. So my idiot publisher came running into my office, and he said, "Stan, do you remember that Spider-Man character of yours that we both liked so much? Let's make it a series." And that's how, I forgot the question, but that's how it happened.
For the new book, Zodiac, what's the inspiration there?
Oh, the inspiration is the fact I was looking for a new idea. Now, what new idea could be left? And then I remembered I've always been fascinated by the Chinese zodiac, by the fact that every year it's the year of a different animal, and that goes on for 12 years and then repeats itself. And that is so deeply ingrained in Chinese culture. And I thought, wow, what if every one of those months gave a hero a certain superpower? And again, I wanted to make the hero a teenage boy, and we're off and running with Zodiac. I can't wait till you read it. He wants to know the psychological underpinnings of the relatives.
Whose idea was it for you to cameo in every Marvel movie?
Believe it or not, it wasn't my idea. It started with the first X-Men movie. The director, Bryan Singer, asked if I would just be in the background of a scene. And as you can tell, even though I'm incredibly shy and retiring, I said I would do it. And then the next guy who did a movie, I forget which it was, he said, "Hey, if Brian used you, I'll use you." I think it was Spider-Man. And he put me in a scene, and then Daredevil, and before you knew it. And I have nothing to do with it. When I go to these places, I never know what they're going to want me to do. They just tell me what to do when I get there, and then they say, "Now get the hell out of here and let us finish the movie." And that's it. I'm there for like 10 minutes, I do my part, and I leave. Thank you.
When you're writing characters, old or new, do you try to give them empathy for others? Is that one of the big things for you?
Oh, I think empathy is one of the most important elements. If you don't empathize with the character, you're not interested in the character. I don't know exactly how to give them empathy. I just try to make them interesting enough that you say to yourself, "Gee, I wish I knew a guy like that in real life. That's an interesting guy. I'd like him for a friend. I wonder what's going to happen to him." So you have to be interested in the character you're writing.